with your host, Jaden Miller.
Good day, and welcome to Think About It with Jaden Miller. I'm your host, Jaden Miller. Hope you guys are doing well on this wonderful Sunday in June. Back at you with another episode of my podcast. We've been talking about the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution, and my wife had joined me on those two episodes. She had something else to do today, so it's just me, Jaden Miller, with you, and just want to take the topic in a different direction to make it a little bit more current, and talk about this whole gun control debate. As you all know, several weeks ago, there was this horrific killing by a white supremacist of a number of black people in Buffalo, New York, at a grocery store. Of course, you all know that we had the horrible shooting in Uvalde, Texas, the killing of 19 children and 2 teachers, just a tragedy. And then since then, we've had several other shootings that have happened in the United States, which has caused a lot of people a great concern. And of course, we can understand why. Before I begin and get into this whole Second Amendment and the gun debate issue, I want to remind you to please check out my website at www.jadenmiller.com. I'll do that again, www.jadenmiller.com. Jaden is Jayden, Miller, all one word.com. Please like, share, and subscribe on my YouTube channel, and like, comment, and follow on your favorite podcast platform. You can find me on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Google Podcasts, Amazon, Castbox, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio, and so many more. So if you're driving in your car, or you're at work, or you're just at home chilling, please tell other people about my podcast. Hopefully you guys find it educational and to some degree entertaining, although it's very hard to find death entertaining, of course. These mass shootings have caused us great concern here in the United States. Yesterday I was able to look up what's happening in other countries, and you would be shocked at New Zealand and France and so many other countries that have some real serious gun restrictions. But yet the murder rate and the number of mass shootings in those countries are almost zero. In New Zealand, there was a mass shooting several years ago. 50 people were killed by another white supremacist person targeting those of a different religious background. I believe they were Muslims. And shortly thereafter, the country enacted some of the strictest gun control measures in the world. And because of those restrictions, there has not been a single mass shooting. So, you know, we have to take into consideration that New Zealand was founded as a country, as a government, differently than the United States was. And therefore, it's so much more difficult to get legislation passed here because you have opposing parties and you have opposing interest. You have gun control lobby, you know, the NRA, and they are extremely powerful. They give millions and millions of dollars to politicians each year. And so that, and thus what that does is that, you know, can have an impact on how politicians vote. So, I mean, think about it. If somebody's giving you millions of dollars a year to vote a certain way, millions of dollars that you can use for your campaign and other expenses, you would tend to vote their position. Okay, money causes a great deal of influence in Congress, and so That's one reason why so many politicians are against certain things. That, I mean, again, money talks. Let's just be honest with ourselves. Money does talk. So again, we have had these tragedies in the country, and even just the other day, there was a shooting in Oklahoma, Tulsa, Oklahoma, where there was a man that killed several doctors and a receptionist and someone that just so happened to be at the hospital with the patient. I guess maybe brought them there. And he had just purchased the weapon a couple of hours before. It was an AR-15, just a few hours before. And so there's another tragedy. You know, I was reading today that in Nashville, 3 people were killed and, 11 people were injured. And then in Philadelphia, another 3 people killed and 12 people or so injured, at a nightclub in Nashville, Tennessee. So, it seems as though these shootings are continuous. But, we have to ask ourselves several questions. We now today live in a 24-hour news cycle. And so we know about these things because they keep throwing them in our faces. They're on our phones and on our computers and on our televisions, okay? But back in the 70s, in specific cities, but I'll mention Chicago because that's my home city, there were many murders in Chicago in the 1970s, okay? Now, mind you, the population was a little higher. Chicago then in the 70s was second in the nation in terms of population. It has fallen behind Los Angeles now, so Chicago is third. Los Angeles is now second behind New York. But even still, as we moved into the 90s, that crime rate started to go back up again until there was some gun laws that were put into place, and then President Clinton started his COPS program, and there were more police officers on the street and that kind of thing. And so we saw a decrease, not in just mass shootings, because we can't remember Columbine was in 1999, but we're just talking about violence with a gun specifically. So what I want to do is talk to you a little bit about the Second Amendment, because that's where this all starts. What does the Second Amendment say? The original text for the Second Amendment is in the United States Constitution, for those of you that are students of the Bill of Rights, and it says a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Okay. So that is what the Second Amendment says in the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights. All right. If you look at those words, though, it's just one sentence. Okay. And again, it says a well-regulated militia. Let's go by each phrase. A well-regulated militia. What does that mean? Well, if you'll recall, during the conflict between the 13 original colonies that then became the United States, all right, and then their mother country, Great Britain, was because of the tyranny of the British Parliament and their king, King George III, against the colonists, all right? And so our founding fathers put in the Constitution a well-regulated militia, because the now new United States of America, the 13 colonies that became 13 states, had no militia. They had no army. Their army was the British Army that was there to protect them. Okay, remember, the United States was a colony of Great Britain. Okay, so there's no need for a militia because you have a military. Okay, and in fact, at the time, Great Britain had the strongest and most powerful military on earth, in the world. Okay, so there was no need for a militia. But our founding fathers said, well, now that we're going to war, or now since we've gone to war with Great Britain, we do. And so it says a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. All right. So now remember, the United States has declared its independence from Great Britain. All right. So now, being necessary to the security of a free state, we are now free. We are not under the auspices of Great Britain anymore. Now, mind you, we do need to fight this war, which they did and won. So now they're a free state. It goes on to say the right of the people to keep and bear arms. What does that mean? Okay, because that is the part in the Constitution that causes great controversy. Okay, all right, the right of the people to keep and bear arms. Well, let's look back at what that means. Okay, a well-regulated militia. What that means is that is necessary, okay, to have individuals that are willing to come together to fight for their state, their country. Okay, it is necessary, the founding fathers say, because for the security of a free state, you need to have a well-regulated militia. Why? To protect you from foreign governments, but to also protect you from your own government. Wasn't Great Britain their own government? Absolutely it was. All right. So they put that there because they wanted to ensure that Great Britain is not our country anymore now, but we remember how it was. And we, the founding fathers, don't want to become just like the tyrannical government that Great Britain had over the colonists. So they're saying that you have, meaning the states, a right, and the people have the right to a well-regulated militia to protect themselves from foreign countries, but to also protect themselves from this government. The right of the people to keep and bear arms. And then the last part of that says, shall not be infringed. Okay, meaning that it cannot be taken away from them. It's just like John Locke, who's a great English philosopher in terms of government and our contract with government. It shall not be infringed means you cannot take away our God-given rights. Okay, the right to life and liberty. And according to Thomas Jefferson, the pursuit of happiness, according to John Locke, property. Okay, those are just our rights. And that's what they're saying here in the Second Amendment, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. A free state must have a militia, must have a military, whether it be of the government or whether it be of the people. See, the right of the people to keep and bear arms. Well, in order to protect yourself, in order to be secured, you have to have arms. Okay. And then finally, it says it shall not be infringed. It cannot, will not, shall not ever be taken away from them. All right. Now, there is an argument that can be made that, well, the Second Amendment was written way back in the 1700s. Okay. All right. And it was. And it was written after the Declaration of Independence and after the war. Okay. The Revolutionary War. Well, now we're in 2022 and the arms have changed. See, we don't have muskets anymore, okay? Where you have to load them, with a musket and put some gunpowder in and then, see, it's not like that. So mass shootings were unheard of, okay? Mass killings, meaning by one person, a group of people are just dead, because there were no weapons of those forms, okay? All right, so an argument can be made, well, the Second Amendment, all right, says this, but it was written at a different time. We're now living in different times. The Second Amendment, the Bill of Rights, is a document that changes as society changes. All right, we know for a fact, okay, that laws have changed in this country over years because the society has grown, has changed, okay? Remember, women could not vote, all right? There's a 19th Amendment now that says they can, all right? Black people cannot be enslaved. Why not? Because there's a 13th Amendment that says you can't enslave us, all right? So it's those kinds of things, all right? Those kinds of amendments that have caused, as a reaction to how society has changed, then those laws have changed. Can that same thing be applied to the Second Amendment? Okay. Remember, don't forget to check out my website at www.jadenmiller.com, and please like, share, and subscribe on my YouTube channel, and like, comment, and follow on your favorite podcast platform. Now let's ask this question. Does the Second Amendment allow owning guns for self-defense? Okay, because it talks about a well-regulated militia in the Second Amendment. It doesn't talk about owning guns for self-defense. But let's see what the Supreme Court said. In the 2008 and 2010 cases, and I'm going to just read them. In the 2008 landmark case, District of Columbia versus Heller, the United States Supreme Court concluded that the Second Amendment includes the right of individuals to bear arms for self-defense. In 2010, McDonald versus City of Chicago extended the prior ruling from federal laws, because that's a federal law, that District of Columbia versus Heller, because the District of Columbia is not a state. The District of Columbia falls under the jurisdiction of Congress. Okay. All right. So there's not a state issue there. It was a federal issue because the District of Columbia is a federal jurisdiction. All right. In 2010, McDonald versus City of Chicago extended the prior ruling from federal laws to state and local laws. All right. So in District of Columbia versus Heller, the Supreme Court concluded that the Second Amendment does include the right of individuals to bear arms for self-defense. And then that was extended to state and local laws as a result of the McDonald versus City of Chicago case. All right. So now we know that the Supreme Court has stated that, yes, the Second Amendment does apply to self-defense and people bearing arms for such. All right. The next question that we might ask is, do militias exist in the United States today? Modern militias are most commonly known as State Defense Forces, or SDFs. Now, this goes back about 12 years, but as of 2010, 23 states and territories maintain their own SDFs. Unlike federal organizations such as the National Guard, SDFs are under the sole jurisdiction of state or territorial governments and cannot be commanded by the federal government. All right. Who wrote the Second Amendment? All right. The Second Amendment was ratified in 1791. It was proposed by James Madison, one of the founding fathers, to allow the creation of civilian forces that can counteract a tyrannical federal government. So remember, these people are still stung by how Great Britain treated them. Anti-Federalists believed that a centralized standing military established by the Constitutional Convention gave the federal government too much power and potential for violent oppression. Okay? They were still concerned about how they were treated by Great Britain, and they didn't want, at least anti-federalists did not want there to be some standing military under the jurisdiction of the federal government. So they wanted to ensure, all right, that militias, they could stand in order to oppose a violent federal government, or again, of course, from an attack from a foreign nation, if that were the case. All right. Now, this is the one that I think is really important, and we'll delve into this matter a little bit more. Is ownership of an assault weapon constitutional? Okay. The Public Safety and Recreational Firearms Use Protection Act in 1994 when Bill Clinton, a Democrat, was in office, banned private use of assault weapons such as certain semi-automatic rifles. Okay, so that's why back then the cops catch you with an AK-47 or AR-15 or what have you. You could be charged locally, of course, state laws, but you could also be charged federally. Okay, this is the thing. All right, it was only in effect for 10 years. So the federal expired in 2014. The Republicans are now in control of Congress. They decide not to bring it back up. All right, not to put it back into effect. All right. So it expired in 2004. So now, after 2004, individuals can purchase assault weapons for private use. Now, some U.S. states have laws that prohibit assault weapons. Some do, okay? Because remember, there's federal rights, federal laws, and then there's state laws. And state laws are to protect, the people that live in those states. Federal laws is to protect all citizens that live in the country, okay? So again, that's why, states can't enact laws that keep black people from drinking out of the same water fountain as white people, okay? Because we know on a country-wide level that's wrong, okay? That goes against the United States Constitution, and it goes against the will of the majority of the people. That's just stupid. All right, so did you know a Pew Foundation report found that 79% of male gun owners and 80% of female gun owners said owning a gun made them feel safer, and 64% of people living in a home in which someone else owns a gun felt safer. Number 2, think about this. The U.S. General Accountability Office estimated that 100% of deaths per year in which a child under 6-year-old shoots and kills him, herself, or another child could be prevented by automatic child-proof safety locks. The Centers for Disease Control listed firearms as the number 12 cause of all deaths between 1999 and 2015, representing 1.3% of total deaths. They were also the number one method of death by homicide, 67.3% of all homicides, and by suicide, 51.9% of all suicides. Did you know, think about this, Mexico has some of the strictest gun control laws in the world, and yet in 2012, Mexico had 11,309 gun murders compared to the United States that had 9,146 gun homicides. Now, these are, for Mexico, 9.97 gun homicides per 100,000 people, and in the United States, that was 2.97 per 100,000 people in the United States. Okay, so Mexico with strict gun laws had a high murder rate. That was in 2012. Carrying a concealed handgun in public has been permitted in all 50 states since 2013, when Illinois became the last state to enact concealed carry legislation. 5 women a day are killed by guns in America. A woman's risk of being murdered increases 500% if a gun is present during a domestic dispute. All right, so those are just some of the issues. In the gun debate, we have to understand that both sides have evidence to back them up. There's a couple of researchers, Zach Lang and Jennifer Seelan. Both of them are highly educated individuals that have done a lot of work on political science and policy and constitutional democracy and those kinds of things. And so they came up with a report just about a year ago that came to the conclusion that both sides of the gun debate, whether you're pro Second Amendment or for some kind of restrictions to some degree, that both sides have evidence to back them up. So, back a year or so ago, there had been mass shootings in Boulder. I remember in Boulder, Colorado, at a King Soopers grocery store, a number of people had been killed. And in Atlanta, there were some Asian women that had been killed by someone. And so Democrats see stricter gun control as a step toward addressing this problem, mass shootings. All right. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi claimed that two gun control bills that came out of House would be the solutions that would save some lives. All right. But you have many Republicans that disagree. So we have Senator Ted Cruz, who has said that proposed laws seeking to require background checks on all firearm sales and transfers and to ban assault weapons are ridiculous theater that failed to reduce mass shootings. All right. So as I mentioned, these two political scientists set out to determine whether gun control legislation actually prevents mass shootings. They collected data on all mass shootings that occurred between February of 1980 and February of 2020. So this would definitely exclude the mass shootings that have happened, since February of 2020. Now, mind you, I read a report the other day that said in this year alone, there had been over 220 something mass shootings in the United States. All right. That's a lot. So when what they did, these two researchers, they examined key information on the perpetrators, weapons used, and laws in effect at that time. All right. So what they're saying is that their research suggests that there is statistical evidence to support both parties' positions about gun control legislation. According to them, while stricter gun control laws may make mass shootings slightly less common, their research suggests that the rhetoric of both parties may not tell the full story. Rather than federal gun control laws, policies that focus on violence prevention at the community or individual levels may be more effective at preventing mass shootings. All right. So if we looked at mass shootings from 1980 to 2020, there were 16 states that saw no mass shootings. 16. So you had Maine, no mass shootings. Okay. You had New Hampshire, you had Vermont, and you had Rhode Island, no mass shootings from 1980 for over a 40-year period. No mass shootings. All right. Then there was Delaware, no mass shootings. All right. So these are some of those 16 states that had no mass shooting. Now there are a few others. There was Alabama, there's Louisiana, there's Indiana, South Dakota and North Dakota, Wyoming, Montana, Idaho, New Mexico, and Alaska. No mass shootings from 1980 to 2020. All right. Now, we had a couple of states that had the most between 1980 and 2020, and that would have been 18 in California and 12 in Florida. They led the nation in terms of mass shootings. All right. So, in Florida, there was that horrible Parkland shooting, and that happened in 2018. But lots of them in Florida. Florida ranked number 2 on the list of states with the most mass shootings, and California ranked number 1. All right. And so then we had a couple of states, 3, that had between 6 and 10 mass shootings. That would include Texas. Texas ranks 3 on the list of states with the most mass shootings, with 10 mass shootings from 1980 to 2020. And again, remember, that does not include the most recent ones in Texas. All right. Colorado, where I lived for a number of years and where I still own a house, ranks 5 on the list of states with the most mass shootings, with 6 from 1980 to 2020. All right. And then we have the state of Washington, which ranked 4th on the list of states with the most mass shootings, with 7. All right. Now, then there's a bunch of states that had 3, 4, or 5 mass shootings. It's 7 of them. So we have Wisconsin, where I also lived for a while. We had Illinois. There's Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York, Maryland, and Connecticut. Those states had between 3, 4, or 5 mass shootings. And of course, in Connecticut, that would have been Sandy Hook, would have been one of those. All right, and then we have this great bunch of states that had only 1 or 2. So very few, okay? And a number of these states would be considered states where they have very, very liberal laws. They're not liberal states, but they have very liberal laws and restrictions when it comes to gun ownership. So many of them that had only 1 or 2 mass shootings would be in that area. So we have Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee, Kentucky, Mississippi, all right, Arkansas, Missouri, Kansas, Oklahoma, all right. Those are on the list of states that only had 1 or 2 mass shootings, so very few, okay. And then if I go up north a little bit from Oklahoma, you would have Nebraska, Iowa, Minnesota, and Minnesota, all right. So those states only had a few. Only 1 or 2. And if we go further west, that would also include Arizona, Utah, Nevada, and Oregon. Okay? All right, so we've gone through all of the states, and we see that in certain areas of the country, there's been lots, but then in other areas, there have been few. So I mean, it's hard to distinguish and say, okay, well, what's the difference between California, having 18 murders, and then another state with a larger population, and that would be, for example, Ohio or Pennsylvania, that had fewer, much fewer. Of course, we can talk about the size of the state. Yes, there's more residents in California than there are in Ohio and Pennsylvania, but we're looking at this, per capita too. All right. Texas, Texas is a very large state, and Texas has some of the most liberal gun laws. Okay. So then why is it number 3? Okay. If we are able to carry concealed or not concealed weapons for our protection, why have so many mass shootings happened in Texas and so many people been killed? So the question then asks, does, following the Second Amendment, does it work? Or does it work in Texas? All right. So let me go back. These researchers said that they defined a mass shooting as a single incident in which a perpetrator with no connection to gang activity or organized crime shot and killed 3 or more people. All right. Now, this is similar to the definition Congress uses. All right. So what they found was that there were 112 of these events between 1980 and 2020. The number of mass shootings each year has increased over time. An overwhelming majority of mass shooters, 87% of them, obtained their firearms legally. Nearly all shooters, 93%, shot their victims in the same state where they obtained their weapon. All right. So now these facts seem to suggest that existing gun laws and regulations governing gun purchases and firearms that cross state lines may not be working to reduce mass shootings. All right. What they did also find is that mass shootings tended to occur in states with stricter regulations. Isn't that something? Of the states with the highest per capita rates of mass shootings, many, like Connecticut, Maryland, and California, employ background checks and assault weapons bans. By contrast, 18 states did not have a single mass shooting event over the entire 40-year period. And many of these states, like West Virginia, Wyoming, and South Dakota, have high rates of gun ownership and relatively loose gun control laws. All right. So what they also took a look at is that gun laws aren't the only factors that affect where and when a mass shooting occurs. All right. The number of police officers per capita, a community's population density and crime rate, and other demographic characteristics such as unemployment rates and average income can also matter. So what they did was they used all of these statistical methods to control for those factors, narrowing their analysis to find out whether various types of gun control laws affected the number of mass shootings or number of mass shooting deaths in each state each year. Specifically, they examined the effects of 4 different types of gun control legislation. Background checks, number 1. Assault weapons bans, number 2. High capacity magazine bans, number 3. And extreme risk protection order or red flag laws. You've probably heard of them a lot lately in the last couple of weeks. That let a court determine whether to confiscate the guns of someone deemed a threat to themselves or others. So what they found was that background check requirements, assault weapons bans, and high capacity magazines bans each reduced the number of mass shootings in the United States. But here we go. Only by a small amount. So they said that enacting a statewide assault weapons ban decreases the number of mass shootings in the state by 1 shooting every 6 years. And none of the 4 types of gun control legislation correlate with fewer total mass shooting deaths. So what they're saying is to some degree, those on the pro-Second Amendment, pro-gun rights side are right. And laws that remove an individual's right to own firearms if that individual poses a risk to the community do not affect the number of mass shooting events. So going further, their analysis suggests that Americans who want to make mass shootings less frequent and less deadly may want to think beyond gun control legislation. Statistically, mass shootings tend to occur in large, densely populated states with higher income and education levels per capita. While these states often respond to mass shootings by passing gun control legislation, it may be that alternative avenues are more successful. What do you mean, Jaden Miller? Well, for example, I want you to think about it. They found that increasing the number of police officers per capita decreases the number of mass shootings. I'm going to take you back a minute, back to the 1990s when Bill Clinton was in office. And he started that COPS program by using federal dollars to increase the number of police officers on the street. Well, when we came out of the 70s and came out of the 80s and into the 90s, and when we saw an uptick in crime, specifically crack cocaine, heroin, and other types of drugs, okay, we saw an increase in the violence, okay? Well, enacting smart legislation, okay, and increasing the number of police officers saw almost immediately a drop in the crime rate across the country. More police officers, all right? What do you think about that? According to the research, they said that there is a wide variety of policy options designed to prevent mass shootings. The American Psychological Association suggests a comprehensive community approach that works to identify prevention strategies that bring public safety officials, schools, public health systems, and faith-based groups together to reduce gun violence. Now, did you hear what I just said? Okay, the American Psychological Association suggests a comprehensive community approach that works to identify prevention strategies that bring public safety officials, okay, that's the police, all right, that might be fire, EMTs, okay. Now, look at this. It says schools. Where do a lot of mass shootings happen? At schools, okay? It talks about public health systems, okay? Well, just the other day in Tulsa, Oklahoma, there's an individual that went in and shot 2 doctors at a hospital, health system. And then the third one is faith-based groups. Now, last week, okay, there was a mass shooting, okay, at a church. And we've heard that there have been mass shootings at churches. All right. So there we have the 3 areas where we have the most amount of this type of gun violence, mass shootings, are at schools, public health systems, and faith-based groups. Think about it. Think about it with Jaden Miller. Aaron Stark, okay, who says he was almost a mass shooter, explains that mass shootings can be an act of desperation resulting from frustration, stress, and an individual's perception that they lack power. This is in line with a United States Secret Service report that suggests politicians may need to think beyond the accessibility of guns. Violence prevention strategies that focus on interpersonal and community relations may be more effective than gun control legislation. I'm going to take you back into the 1990s again when community policing came into fruition. We saw a decrease in crime. Why? Because you had, instead of the police driving around in cars with their windows up, okay, not having any kind of relationship with the community, we saw crime high. Okay, when we got police officers out of cars and had them going to schools, okay, hospitals, okay, clinics, all right, churches, all right, we then saw a decrease in the crime. Look it up. So you see what they're saying? They're saying we have to go beyond this. Oh, well, we need to have background checks. Because think about it, guys. If somebody wants to get access to a weapon, they don't have to go to a gun store to purchase it. They don't. All right? Many policy options involve value judgments stemming from beliefs about the U.S. Constitution and the power of government to regulate guns. I understand that. I come from that same place, okay? Because as someone, okay, that is a student, I'm a teacher, but I'm a student of the Constitution. I read and try to determine what the founding fathers were saying then, and then compare that to the lives we live today. Among people who think that restricting gun access reduces mass shootings, people disagree over whether the country should prioritize the individual freedoms of gun owners or the safety and peace of mind of non-gun owners. These differing views can reflect different interpretations of the extent to which the Constitution protects the rights of individuals to keep and bear arms. States have a role to play too. Federal gun policy covers the entire nation, okay? But according to these researchers, their data indicates that attention to state and local factors can play an important role in preventing mass shootings, okay? So maybe what we need to do is when we're in schools and we see children that are acting differently or giving us telltale signs that they may do something that could harm other people, maybe instead of stopping to ignore them, or maybe stopping to appease parents who act like children sometimes and say, you know what, we're going to take matters into our own hands. Maybe that can help stop it, okay? Because there are parents today, and we know this for a fact, okay, that want to protect their children at all costs, okay? Their children can be the worst, can be bad, can be upsetting and causing problems in classrooms and for schools, but those parents will still stand up for their children. And I'm not saying that parents shouldn't stand up for their children. I'm saying parents shouldn't stand up for their children and their nonsense. That's what I'm saying. But there are a lot of parents that are engaged in nonsense, and so they allow nonsense. Think about it with Jaden Miller. All right. So, like always, it's not for me to share my thoughts, okay? Because I want you all to have this discussion with your families and your friends, and you can certainly comment on any of my podcast platforms, on my YouTube channel. But what do you think? Okay, that's why it's called Think About It with Jaden Miller. I want you to think about it and tell me what you think. Okay, all right. I believe in the Second Amendment. I do. All right, but I wonder, have times changed, and do we need to look at things? Okay, should people have the right to defend themselves and have guns in their homes? Yes. Okay. Do people need to have AR-15s? Should we require people to have background checks? Okay? All those questions are things that need to be answered. At the local level, what is it that we can do more so of in order to prevent these things by really taking a look at the people that are around us that may seem to be a little different? And I'm not talking about different in the sense of they just want to be non-conformist. I'm talking about people that send threats on Facebook, posting images, saying things that would, lead a reasonable person to believe that they may be at some time someone that we need to watch out for. Okay. And so I believe this happened many, many times before. Okay. We saw these individuals, as children and how they were acting. Okay. And didn't go the extra step. All right, in order to prevent some of these things from happening. Okay, it's the same thing with these white supremacists, whether it be in South Carolina with the killing at that church or again in Buffalo, New York. How do we stop these people, okay, that have these views, about people that look different from them? Is it that they have these views because some of our politicians subscribe to, bias and their own levels of racism and that kind of thing? We need to ask ourselves those questions, okay? And then lastly, the thing you guys need to know is that among the gun control debate, people of color are starting to purchase guns more so than they ever did. There was a National Shooting Sports Foundation. It was a retail survey that was done that found between 2019 and 2020, there was a 58% increase in African Americans buying firearms and a 49% increase in Hispanic Americans buying firearms and a 43% increase in Asian Americans buying firearms. Okay. What does that suggest to you? Okay. That perhaps people, feel as though, we need to protect ourselves mainly because the average time it takes for police to respond to certain emergencies. Well, in between that time, what are you doing? Okay. Are you going to fight back? Are you going to become victimized? Those are some questions, and those are some legitimate questions. In this country, after the Civil War, there were laws enacted, and then the Ku Klux Klan came into being because now you have all of these free black people, that are now citizens, or actually they don't become citizens until the 14th Amendment, but you have all of these free black people that were former slaves. Well, what is their political status? Okay. Can they own firearms? Well, of course, back then, what former white plantation owner wanted their former slaves to have weapons? Okay. All right. So as an African American, that always makes me wonder, when we talk about this whole Second Amendment debate, do I want total restriction? Because, that's the same thing that happened to blacks right after the Civil War. You can't have weapons, but white people can have weapons. Okay. So we can protect ourselves. You can't. And thus you can become the victimizer, over these people just by merely having laws that state that they can't have them just simply because of the color of their skin. I wonder about that and I worry about that. All right, so that's the gun control issue for the day. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Again, please check out my website at www.jadenmiller.com. You can click on the link for podcast. You can also check out my photography if you like to. Please like, share, and subscribe on my YouTube channel, and like, comment, and follow on your favorite podcast platform. All right. Again, that's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Google Podcasts, Amazon. You can find me on there, Castbox, iHeartRadio, and many, many more. All right. Thank you guys for listening. This is Jaden Miller, and I hope you all have a fabulous rest of your day.
Thank you for listening to Think About It with Jaden Miller. Don't forget to like and subscribe to his YouTube channel, and like and follow on your favorite podcast platform.